Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all well. It's that time of the week yet again. I think this episode 51. Christ, unbelievable. So yeah, really successful auction again last night. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and supported that. Yeah, some great fish went in there. Didn't see it all, but I heard the Benny Ginga was particularly exciting. It was a cracking piece. So yes, got a few bits to run through this evening, but the main part of this is your live questions. So please feel free to start filling the feed up, and I'll do my best to run through them all. Yeah, bits and bobs. Anyway, I think I've got a bit of koi appreciation loaded up tonight that Chris has sorted out for me as well. So another one of the Nichi shows out moustache, which has been a very, very interesting one, to be honest with you. Yeah, so before we really get into it, we've got, the subscribers on the channel. When we look at the stats, I think it's only something like 25%, 30% of the viewers of the channel are actually subscribed. So, yeah, it's really helpful if you can subscribe, if you're regularly tuning in and you're not over on YouTube, because it just helps the channel grow. And, yeah, certainly inspires all the team to keep putting their efforts in. Say the whole reason we ever started this was just to provide as much education and enhancement for the hobby as we could. So yeah, if you're not already subscribed, please hit that button. And yeah, we've got an event coming up. Chris has been working on at the weekend. I think it's on Sunday. The fish actually go live for dealers to buy, and it's the Omasako Chibi Nisai. Pretty awesome pieces. If you haven't seen already on YouTube, I've actually done a feature on the Akawa sheer Utsuri, which were really small Nisai, because something I get hit with all the time, and I think this is just lack of understanding, is small Nisai doesn't mean it's going to be a small fish. In fact, even putting it should just be called Nisai. And I think people have become so accustomed to seeing Nisai being, 45, 50, even up to 60 centimeters and beyond now, that yeah, it's just become the custom. So when we see them at like 20, 25 cm, the perception is those fish aren't going to grow. That is not the truth. Basically, what happens with these fish is there can be lost growth, but this next year is going to be a sort of pivotal one for them. But what you've also got to imagine is that lost growth is only going to be hit at certain ages and size points. So, a small Nisai, you're easily going to grow through from any decent bloodline up to, say, 70 centimeter, even probably beyond that. Not going to be an issue. It might be, its size for its age is a bit behind something else, but it's still going to get there. These are the things you've got to bear in mind. You should be focusing on the quality of the fish. Likewise, if it's not got the right body, the koi is never going to grow, regardless of how big it is for its age. But the small Nisai, so the Akawa ones that I did, I think we've got some more follow-up content to do on these for sure, but they were like, I think it was about September time, 12 to 15 cm, or I think it was probably October, as the harvest season came. And then I started growing them. It was always the plan to give them the sort of winter grow on. And yeah, sure enough, now they're up to and beyond 40 centimeters as Nisai. So they're just normal size Nisai now. Not quite 24 months old still, like any other Nisai. So, yeah, good one. It's a good conversation to have. Probably one we'll talk more about, because I think it's an understanding that needs to be had. Small Nisai, even in Japan, they're raised for competitions in that instance. In this case, with the Shiro, it's just Omasako had a lot, and they were left over in the fish house over the summer and kept ticking over. But in the case of some, like at Narita, for example, they've got growing programs where fish are raised sometimes to the advantage of the fish, just to keep them at certain sizes. So, yeah, it can be quite normal to see 3-year-old fish in the 30s and 40 centimeter mark, because it's all been about developing them to their strengths in order to compete at a certain size class or whatever it is in Japan. So, yeah, it's an interesting topic. Like I say, one that needs more awareness, I think. But for now, I can show you a quick video of the fish being entered, and then you'll be able to find them on the website. I think we've got a video on YouTube dropping about them soon. But it's a pretty remarkable bowl of fish, to be honest with you, and some real quality and potential in there. There really is. So these are all, you can find these on the events tab of the Koi Wholesale site. They're all listed on there with the sizes. But yeah, there's nothing going to stop these from growing. It's a phenomenal bowl of fish, phenomenal quality. You can see bone structures, shapes, everything I talk about normally, they possess it all. And they're from a top lineage, they're from Omasako. It's the breeder who makes it happen with Shiro Utsuri, the main man. And to find this kind of standard at the price we've got them at is quite remarkable. So, like I say, you can find them individually over on the site and the dealer page as well to see who you can purchase those through. And your dealer just needs to be on there on Sunday in order to try and grab that fish for you. First come, first serve. So, yeah, I'll play that video a little bit later on for everyone to have a look at again. But yeah, the small Nisai one, like I say, great conversation. But as you'll see from the Akawa fish that I've raised, when you see the follow-on videos on YouTube, amazing things can be done with them still. And it's just, yes, if you're talking about it, there could be, if you get to sort of 3-year-old and they've not regained some of that growth, then the later life growth is gonna have a bit of a drop off. But other than that, you're still going to smash them through to 70, 75s. And that for most people is going to be a mega fish in the pond when that happens. So always good to put some context into these conversations and things that get banded around. No, I'll give you 60 quid for that bowl, Ricky. I'm sure you would, pal. I'll sell you the bowl for 60 quid. It's a bit knackered, to be fair. Corners just need refiberglassing. But as for the fish, you'll have to pay me a bit more for them, fella. Right, I suppose I should get on with some questions. I'm not quite sure if there was else I had to tell you. I'm sure I'll get told off if I haven't. But yeah, let's see what we've got to. When going to sorry, Steve in background firing in. There we go. When going to Japan at this time of year, like you, bro, what are you looking for that you wouldn't have seen in the autumn harvest? Ian, that's a fairly easy one, to be fair. I mean, autumn is all about the sort of fresh pick of Nisai, Sansai and beyond, if that's important to people. In spring, you could say you've got a fuller range because then you've got the Tosai on top, new batches of Tosai coming through as selections are done. And yeah, sort of following on from that as well, you've also got Nisai, but all, probably the issue is it's not the first pick in Nisai, but you'll still find a lot of really good quality fish, and albeit at a lower price than you'll see in autumn as well. So yeah, personally, if you're a dealer and you're thinking of that one time a year to go, spring is the time to do it because it's so much more inclusive of everything. Autumn, you've got to have a lot of commitment. It's a bit of a rat race, going back to breeders every day sometimes, or going back, getting the harvest schedule. A lot of them, sometimes they stick to it, sometimes they don't. So you can be planning in that, this breeder's doing this time. Sometimes you have to obviously make a compromise because you'll have multiple breeders harvesting the same time, same day. So you decide where it is you're going to hit. You can never hit everywhere at the same time. So if you got first pick somewhere, you're bound to lose somewhere else. But yeah, it's just a constantly evolving process. Whereas this time of year, most of that's all done. Fish are sat in the fish house. As breeders have got more time, you can get your business done, quite easily. So, yeah, my favourite time of year, generally. I like autumn for different reasons. For business, not so much. But, yeah, spring is, I think, the most inclusive time of year, certainly. Following on from that, we've got another Japan question from Gary. I'm working in Tokyo in March. Is there anywhere recommend to visit for a few days free I have? A few days free. I mean, from Tokyo, you're like an hour and 45 minutes to get to Nagaoka, where all the breeders are. But then it's actually getting there without any help. I mean, you could rent a car and just go driving out there. But again, breeders, if you're not a known face, they're going to get, a bit narky. I've seen it happen more and more, to be honest with you, with people just walking around fish houses when they don't know who they are and they don't know how to sort of introduce themselves or anything like that. However, there is, if you could get to Ogia, There's the Nishikigoi Museum there, which is quite a great site. March, it's not going to be the best season because I don't think the outdoor area will be open. But the indoor pond's certainly there, and there's a fair bit to learn from. But yeah, other than that, there's not too many places you can just go and have a wander and have a look round, unfortunately. So the Nishikigoi Museum is probably the best I can give you on that one, Gary. And that's in Ogier. Like I say, you can get to Nagaoka. Even from Nagaoka Station, you can get a train to Ogier. So you can do it all quite easily. And yeah, go and have a look round there by all means. Tony Barker, good evening. Are Matzocaribaki bred from Matzocaribaki parents, or are they oddballs from Shirotsuri spawning? No, they are their own lineage. What you often tend to find is breeders producing Matzocaribaki. It's basically a Wagoi type Komonryu. So Matzocaribaki breeders will often mix Matzocaribaki or Hajiro with Komonryu in one spawning, and it's sort of yeah, that's where a lot of them are producing it from. So yeah, great variety, but no, not a throwback Shiro. Funnily, you say that as well. Neil from Summit Bangkok has been up today and bought one of my Kawa Ginrin Shiros, which looked remarkably like a Ginrin Matzocaribaki. But yeah, not completely different. And the end sort of look and result of the fish is going to be different. It's just at the sort of phase of its transition as the Sumi is coming up, it looked really, really similar. But it actually took an Aoki Matzocaribaki I had, and there you can sort of see a difference. They've got that more sort of informal layout of Sumi like a Komonryu has. So yeah, an interesting Matzocaribaki in the times where I've seen Katsumi trying to breed Beniginga. That's what he was actually trying to cross Kajaku with Matzocaribaki. That's the pairing he was trying to use there. So yeah, good question there, Tony. Thank you. Paul, how did Omasako do at the All Japan this year? Did he wipe the floor as usual in the Shirotsuri variety? It goes without question. I mean, I've got their calendar this year's with all their award-winning fish, and yeah, the guys just dominate. It's ridiculous. I think NND with the DKs did quite well in the sort of smaller sizes, but not too many firsts this year, to be honest. Really, really strong performance from Omasako. You know, best in variety. All that lot, they really do mop up. And this is the thing, though, when you see the scale of that operation, you know, there's a lot of breeders breeding good Shirotsuri, but I'd say that it's the numbers that this is the problem. The quantity of quality that Omasako has is just on another level. It really is, and that genetic capability to raise them big as well. I mean, in that big size class, there's just nobody getting close to the guys in the slightest. But yeah, so many of them. When I visit the farm, you know, good Nisai Shirotsuri, they just go through the levels up to, you know, the high levels, or let's call it the mid level from an Omasako thing, is the kind of level that other breeders are classing as their highest level. And there's loads of them. And Omasako has probably got, you know, 2 more gears above that stuff. So yeah, remarkable what they do with that variety. And yeah, if you've not got an Omasako Shiro, it's one well worth having, because they are the people to have one from for sure. Raz Clark, salt usage. Yes. So, there we go. Look, that was a question from earlier. Is it possible to give info about salt usage? Right. Salt is a very, very useful tool to have. I don't use it for medicating against parasites. Never have done. I find that the least effective way for dealing with that, although some parasites can be killed with it. Again, not my favorite mechanism. For me, salt is a conditioning tonic, if you like, treatment, whatever you want to call it. In the trade, very, very essential. It's very good at recovering fish from heavy periods of stress, because during heavy periods of stress, one of the biggest things that gets attacked is the osmotic system. And at that point, it can cause what's based in simple terms like dehydration of the fish and multiple organ failure. That's like when sleeping sickness, the CEV virus attacks the fish. That's what's happening. We lose the osmotic system, and from that, everything else just sort of tumbles. The fish dehydrates, and before you know it, it's dead. So what we do with the salt in that instance is bring the salt in the water closer to the internal level of the fish, which therefore takes pressure off the osmotic system, which allows the rest of or more energy to be spent on, the immune system and everything else recovering after that. So in that case, high periods of stress, we're talking after a shipment, essential. It really is, to medicate against CEV, the virus, sleeping sickness, if they get it. All we can use is salt and heat, because then we need their immune system to do the rest. So basically the temperature in that case gets the immune system firing. The salt just takes the pressure off the body, which then allows the immune system to do the rest. That's why we use that combination there. The other where I see this working for you guys, really, because you're not really having those high periods of stress events in your pond. The one where you really are is sort of this time of year, and that's where you're having your highest stress. So what it can be, if you've got an unheated pond and you're having certain problems, where it could just be the cold got to the fish a bit, or there's something a bit viral kicked off, it's not parasitic, or you've had a parasitic problem and found that after the medication and everything, they're laying over, they're looking pink, they're looking stressed. If you can't heat the water, one of the only other real things that you can do, because you don't want to keep adding medications if there's no parasites, one of the only other things you can really do is if you can add salt, again, just relieve the stress, leave the pressure on the body while it's cold, and hopefully let the immune system kick up and deal with the rest. So yeah, that's the one. When you're using it, however, this is the important thing, because I've seen this sort of like the old thing when I got into it. Some people who have been doing it for you say, I chuck a bit of salt in every now and again. That's no good. You're going to get nothing from doing that. What you need to be doing when you're using salt is having a proper digital tester and using it at the right levels. So like 0.3%, for example, half ounce per gallon is a good sort of background reading that in the trade we'll often use when there's high stress all the time, lots of netting, all the rest of it can just be handy. When I'm treating more against the things I've mentioned, we'll be raising higher up to like 0.5, 0.6%, which is 1 ounce per gallon. But that's only for a limited time period to get the fish right, give them a little period after that, and then start reducing it down. So yeah, that's not all the time. But you've got to be getting them levels and consistency. One of the biggest thing I see is if you're using salt, they need to be in that level for a period of time in order for it to do its job without fluctuating levels of it as well, which you've got to bear in mind. So I hope that's useful. If you want me to elaborate further on anything, feel free to pop another question in and I'll go further in case there's anything I've not particularly answered there for you. But yeah, just they're all sort of just throwing some in and not really knowing what's going off. Absolutely useless. You're not going to get any of the sort of benefits from salt in doing that. So hope that's useful for you. I can see the wife's watching again. Honestly, biggest fan. I love the support. It's unbelievable. Every week she watches, listening to me rambling on about fish when she doesn't really give a monkey's about them. So and the kids as well. So yeah, hats off to her. Right. Grey Fox. Hello, Ricky. Any suggestions on picking golden corn tosai? Our club is doing a grow out of them this year. Thank you. Great show and info. That's a pleasure. Yeah. So picking golden corn. Sorry. The only sort of criteria I went on at tosai was again, this depends on whether you're going for the one that's basically yellow based or white based. Because what's happening is the yellow base are going to develop a red Kanoko, the white base are going to develop a yellow Kanoko. So that's what you got to consider first of all. For the yellow, well, for most of them, the biggest thing was body. Obviously, that's a given. When you're selecting, you need to be checking the body out first of all. Now, with the yellow ones, I was looking for some kind of sign of that strong. When we spoke about the pigment in the middle of the scale, that sort of strong red line where possible, consistently across the fish, and then a nice consistent yellow color. That for me was the fish that's going to have the best chance of developing the red Kanoko. If that red's not there in the middle of the scale, this isn't going to happen. So yeah, that's the one for the yellow type. For the white type, they're a bit more of a gamble. So again, my selection criteria is based on the fact there's a lot of Asagi DNA in these which is the main thing pushing the Kanoko. So, and the colour, where the colour comes up beneath the lateral line. They've been a big part of the breeding. So what I was looking for with the white ones is any sign of some yellow pigment. That could be one tiny bit on the gill, the fin, the cheek, or below the lateral, just one scale of yellow. That was enough for me to say, well, look, there's potential there for yellow Kanoko to come, as it would be with an Asagi. That's exactly the same way I select an Asagi. So other than that, you obviously pay attention to the sort of Ginrin because it's a part of them. But other than that, it's a lot of a gamble with these. That's part of the fun of golden corn. We don't know exactly what's going to come from those Tosai. So it's just basically eliminating, in this case, trying to eliminate the ones that I don't think are going to do anything and investing the time in the others. But that was the criteria that I was using at the early stage. And it served me well. Certainly, I would use the same criteria, having seen the results from that. So, but it is a gamble. They're very, very random. But like I say, that is the part of the variety. So, hope that's helpful for you, Greg. Jason Freeman, how the Taniguchi Grown doing? Have you had any info as of yet? No. So last time I saw them, it wasn't too long after. So that was in my trip in December. They put a bit of weight on. They were looking good. The next time we'll see them is when I plan to go out, probably in March or April at some point. So that's it. That'll be the next time all you guys get an update and we go through and decide what's going to happen with them from there. And I can see my brother trying to wind me up there. So evening, everyone. He's on his way to Japan at the minute, and then he's going to send me a picture of his ramen tomorrow lunchtime. So that'll be me not talking to him for the rest of the week. Brilliant. Not envious of that flight though. Jesus, it's a real big one, that. Right, Surrey Koi, I'm building a grow on 1,500 litres. What filtration do you recommend for 20 Tosai? So interestingly, what you've sort of posed there and the way you posed it is everyone going about it. I would not be basing this on the fact of it being 20 Tosai. I would be basing this on what you're looking at feeding, because in a growing pond, that's going to be the main governing factor in all this. Stocking levels for my ponds between me growing them and just holding stock in them are completely different beasts. So, if you want to have a target level, say, of hopefully feeding 500 grams of food per day, that's what you need to be calculating the filter capacity around. So kind of at that, we know an easy pod's not going to do the job, for example, whereas an easy pod would easily filter a 1,500 litre pond. With that kind of feeding level, it's just going to crumble. So even though it's a small pond, instantly there, you'd be looking more at a Nexus for filtering it, and then possibly even a Nexus with above pond filtration, depending on that eventual feeding level. So that's the sort of calculations you're going to want to be running, and then looking at what biocapacity is needed to run that from there, basically. Because 20 Tosai, like I say, really honestly, that fish body weight without food is almost irrelevant in how a system performs. Obviously, it has a bit of impact, but nothing compared to when the food starts hitting them. So, my 400-gallon quarantine ponds I was using, we would often stock those with around 350 12 to 15 centimetre Tosai with one of our trickle towers on. But feeding in there was bare minimal. It was just enough to keep these ticking over during quarantine. If I fed how I fed the growing ponds in those ponds would have just absolutely fell to pieces. So, and then you've got to consider, what kind of flow rate and turnover you want as well. And that's going to be based on how much you're feeding. So lots to consider there. But again, 20 Tosai, that's not calculations I can do off the top of my head. I'm not going to lie. Could do it roughly trying to calculate what you'd be feeding at 3% body weight per day, but I've not got all the calculations in front of me for that one. So you could roughly estimate off of that and go, well, look at feeding 3%. That's not the way I do it, but we can use it to get some rough figures. Feeding 3% body mass, you're going to need X amount of 100 grams per day, and then work your filtration out from there, leaving yourself some spare capacity as well. So I would guess if you're going for it with that amount of water, what we got, about 300 odd gallons. Yeah, like I say, I just don't think an easy pod's going to cut it for you. You could possibly look at going easy pod as your mechanical filter. So, you know, out your bottom drain into that, and then up and over quite a large shower, you know, probably a meter wide, something like that, or as wide as you can get it on your tank. But yeah, it's going to be based around that feeding level more than the fish. And that's something that's really wise for anybody to consider when they're looking at filtration for a new pond. Is not based on a number of fish or looking at the manufacturer's quota, saying, you know, this filter's good for up to 4,000 gallons, for example, because there's just too many variables in that to do it. A lot of the time, what these figures are worked off is flow rates. So sort of flow rates that can be passed through the filter based on the size of the pond. And that's where they draw these conclusions through. I think like with the Nexus, for example, they'll state that and flow rates. And they also did used to state the feed capacity of K1, because like, say like a Nexus standard, I think it's got 50 litres of media, but you can expand it up to 200. Well, that's a massive difference in food capacity there. So that's where you want to be looking at it from that angle. And yeah, I've got somewhere, I'll say, that the calculations, but I think you can get them even actually on Evolution Aqua's website somewhere. There's a fish sort of weight graph that you can look at and get it. If you add an estimated weight load up, say, then look at aimed feeding 3% of it, which would be the bare minimum you'd want to be feeding for growth. You can roughly work out from there. And then if you look at K1's quoted capacities, work it all back, buddy, and fingers crossed, get your answer. Sorry, I can't give you any specifics, but that's one of them. There's just too much to it. And yeah, I don't do like shit like that in my head. So there we go. Right, Peter, is it possible to know the original point of a koi as I bought koi that should have been Japanese, and the vet told me that they were Israeli? Right, that's quite obviously subjective based on the vet's experience there. Don't get me wrong, there's times where I can quite easily spot that. There's some Israeli fish that will test it, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I think just for a lot of people, just to glance and know, that's hard to. Probably the best way would be to route it back through, you know, knowing the dealer, where the dealer's bought from. How the fish are sold is a really good way with this, to be honest with you. If you're new to a koi and you don't really know, Israel have a very different system to the Japanese in the way in which the fish are sold, and the language around it all often transfers through to the dealer. So with Japanese outlets, Japanese sellers, to be honest with you, often you'll hear breeders' names quoted, sizes quoted in centimeters. You won't hear a grading system because it's just not things that are used. Ages of fish will often be stated in the Japanese system, Tosai, Nisai, Sonzai, Yonzai, through like that. With Israel, it's very different. So Israel are sold on grades. So you've got your A grade, triple A grade, whatever it is. They're sold in inches as well as a size metric. And often there'll not be any breeder information because it's not really that relevant to the people buying them. It's just not the way that side of the industry works. So that's probably the best sort of tips I could give you for figuring out, you know, if you've got somebody using that kind of system where they're selling in inches, they say, you know, these are triple A grade fish. There's no any specific breeder information, and they're saying the Japanese. I would be cautious at that point, to be honest with you, because I know most Japanese koi dealers I know will always give some kind of information on breeders, where the fish are from, and ages and things like that, because it's all very important and part of the added value of Japanese fish. So, you know, dealers want people to know it. So as far as that goes, that's the best tip I could go. You could probably work back to knowing where you bought it from and seeing how they sell fish and what information they've got to hopefully give you a bit more of a gauge. There are ways. I think the big one for me is when I look at Israeli fish, it's all in the body and the fins. There's a massive difference in the majority of them. And I think it's just sheer experience that helps me see that, having seen pictures and seeing them in outlets and things all that over the years. But there are some where it's really, really hard to tell the difference, and a super, super refined eye might get caught out. But yeah, I think, you know, what I've just mentioned there could be a useful tool if you're new to koi and trying to figure out if you're getting ripped off. Yeah, hopefully that can shed some light on it for you. So yeah, good question there. Just going to get a bowl of water, dry it out again. Right, next one. We've got half an hour, so just while I guzzle some of this down, for those of you who weren't on earlier, we've got an Omasako event coming up the weekend. The fish available to buy through our dealer network. They're small chibi Nisai, as they're known. So Nisai that aren't obviously the size of others, purely because of how they've been raised. As I was talking about it earlier, please don't mistake these as being fish that don't grow when you see chibi Nisai and small Nisai and all that, because it's not the case at all. These have still got plenty of growth left in them, as I've proved and shown with the Akawa ones that I've been raising and documented on YouTube, which the final parts of that, will be along before we know it. But yeah, the quality of these is phenomenal. Omasako, the world's #1 Shirotsauri breeder. And just look at them. That's all of the fish that are available. You can find them on our website under the events page or on our Facebook page. You'll find the link so you can sit and look at them all individually. There's some serious potential in there. And these are just, the minute you give them the growing conditions, they're going to fly. And what you often find as well is when fish have sort of had a season where they miss out a bit, certainly over the sort of Tosai, Nisai, Sanzai route, they do play serious catch up if you give them a good summer. If I set about these over the summer months, I'll have some pretty impressive sized or sort of normal sized Sanzai. I've seen that plenty of times over the years, because it can be quite normal that, Nisai and Sanzai and things do have a bad year if a mud pond's not performing. It's pretty normal for that to happen. So it's an amazing bowl of fish. We've got them at a really nice price point as well. So if you are after a Shirotsauri, there's no better breeder to go to. So check those out, guys. Right, let me just see where I got to with those questions. Marston knee, I think we did touch upon bits this last week, but once the weather starts becoming warmer, how would you start feeding again? I'm going to use an automatic feeder, which will be the first time. What's the best way to start off, and what problems can happen? Yeah, so I think I did touch on this, because I won't go too much into it, because I have written a really, really in-depth article for issue 22, I think it is. 21, sorry, coming up of Koi Talk. So I would, I'm going to push you to plug that to go really in depth on that one, to be honest with you, because I put a hell of a lot of time and effort into that, because I know, it's issue 21 coming up at the end of this month, I believe. So it's already off to print. That's where I go. But it's more the general thing I'm going to give you is it's just caution. Remember, your feed, if you're not heated, you're going to have loads of fluctuating temperatures, and you've got to start feeding your filter as much as you have your fish. So it's very, very slowly, and consistency is going to be your key. So if you have got a feeder, don't go putting too much in, but what you do put, a small amount, but consistently. And after, a couple of weeks, your pond, 2 or 3 weeks, your pond's coping with it, you can add a gradual increase to it. So even if it only is twice a day, and I know it's hard because you like to manually feed your fish, but during that time, consistency is key anyway when you're growing and raising fish, and for your filters. So I would really say, if you're deciding you're just going to want once a day in there, for example, set your amount. If your pond has coped with that over a 2 or 3 week period, and you still think you can push a bit more, and give it that slight increase. Just with a lot of feeders, the increase from one setting to another can be too much sometimes. So you've got to be very, very mindful of that fact. But yeah, probably, the automatic feeder might not be something you want to introduce till sort of like the summer, 18 degrees and beyond, where you can start looking more at growth and you've got consistent temperatures to lay a consistent pattern down. Whereas at the minute, it might just be worth manually sort of weighing or getting a measure and just chucking them in, because at the temperatures, the sort of spring temperatures you're going to hit, once, twice a day is only really going to be where you're at. So pros and cons to both there, but let's say if you're using the feeder, just set it low, but make sure you got that consistency and the pond's handling it, and make sure the increment when you come to it's not going to be too much. So, yeah, as for the rest, like I say, if you're subscribed, you'll be getting that one because we haven't opened the subscriptions, but look out for it coming. I should imagine it'll probably be in our online, the Koi Talk online store, probably beginning of March, and you can pick a copy of, you'll be able to buy the back issue and have a read of that article because it's a pretty big one that covers off all the areas as much as I can remember. So, yeah, sorry to all back on that one. Nathan Carter, why don't people have blue lining for their ponds? So yeah, well they can. Obviously, it's mainly done with fiberglass, the blue top coat. I think the issue with a lot of it is like when I mean Omasako is a good one to question because all the Omasako ponds are blue. In autumn, it looks absolutely fantastic because it's all been cleaned. You know, the ponds, it's the Japanese way. They empty the ponds, they jet wash everything, fire it back up with fresh water for autumn, for the selling season. So it looks great over the selling season. Then obviously they leave it, you know, it's going to be left until the ponds get emptied out again. I think ultimately then, you know, if we've got a pond, we don't empty our ponds like that. They just keep going on and on and on. Therefore, you go for blue, and ultimately what ends up happening is it's just covered in algae anyway. So you lose the effect of it. I would say that's possibly why more people don't go for it. It just seems a little bit pointless, to be fair. My Nan's watching as well. There's one of my other top supporters. Evening, Nan and Gray. Right, next one. Gaz's Koi Pond. What is your opinion on the usage of clays in your pond? Pros and cons. Just bear with me, folks. Throat's drying up again. Yeah, I'm absolutely pro clay. To be honest, I like a good clay. I'm a big fan of the Back to Plus one. I've found that to be really effective. I think I mentioned last week as well, I found that it can actually be quite useful for sumi development. I've certainly seen ponds where I've used it progress sumi really well. In the middle of summer more than anything, I saw it because I didn't expect to see sumi looking how it was in such extreme temperatures. So yeah, I mean, pros, it can be good when you're using it, create a bit of turbidity in the water during summer when you've got a lot of sun, if you've not got any other shade and stuff like that. But generally, I just find it a good tool for skin luster. You know, whatever method that is, what it does to the water, ingested, who knows? But ultimately, you know, I do find it useful. Also, it can help bind particles in your water. It is a flocculant, so it's very good for that. And as was once explained to me, it can help, you know, just with any, you know, sort of waterborne bacteria and things like that, that flocculant, get it in there so your system can pull it out and get away with it. So, yeah, no issues for me in using clays. I always see benefits to it there. So, crack on. And like I say, the Back to Plus, I find a good one. The other one I absolutely loved, I'm not even sure if it's still kicking around in Japan, was Refresh. That stuff was phenomenal. What that seemed to do to the fish in the water, it turbocharged them, put a sparkle on everything. It was really quite remarkable. I don't think anybody brings it in anymore, and it was pretty lively with the price. But other than that, I've been really happy with Back to Plus, and it's a very affordable product and just seems to, you know, do good all round. I'm a big fan of Back to Plus products, full stop. To be fair, I've been using them for a couple of decades now. So good stuff and good question. AC Aerotech and Home Hobby. I've heard a few YouTubers say Japanese mud ponds are void of any minerals whatsoever. So how true is this? Yeah, that's just one of them that's come. It gets banded around, all the rest of it. Here's my take on this one. They might be void of minerals. The Japanese breeders, certainly in Niigata, are adamant it's the quality of the clay that produces the results. Whether that's because of minerals or not, because we know most of them are very soft watered. So, you know, there's not probably that many minerals actually in there. But yeah, I mean, the whole point of this really is getting on with, you know, this come from people trying to analyze what a mud pond does and how the results of a mud pond are achieved. Now, when you actually break it down, it's quite simple, you know, for me, and this is how I analyze it. A mud pond, for one, I mean, let's just look at the size of it and the amount of water. One of the things, if we look at how I like to design a pond with a large sort of long surface area, I mean, Christ, the mud pond, they've got so much space to swim, which is phenomenal for building that muscle and helping to get volume. Furthermore, where they are in Japan, the mud ponds, they've got the temperature. So we're talking mid-20s for the bulk of the summer. Absolutely on point where they need to be, holds ambiently for most of the growing season. So we've got that criteria. We've then got, obviously, the food. So on top of the manual food that's fed, there's these absolute powerhouse treats that are in there, if you like. All the crustaceans, the worms, snails, anything else that they're finding, insects. When you analyze them, roughly, they're super high protein, super high fat, you know, everything you want in that kind of thing to help boost that growth and that volume. Plus, you know, the organic loading in the mud pond, the dilution in there is phenomenal. There's so much water in them, you know, the sort of pathogen pressure is really, really low. So there's not a lot of stress on the fish, which is really, really good for them. And then we look at the water itself. I was having this conversation actually with Andy Finch the other day, was really getting into a water conversation, and basically the poor state of the water out of our mains in this country. But in Japan, you know, most of those mud ponds are filled with snow. There we go. It's super, super pure, you know, not messed around with water that fills them. And you're telling me that is not having a massive impact on how these fish react and live in this environment. It's playing probably the biggest part, because it's just, you know, that water is just like our air. You know, if the quality of it's shit, it has a negative impact on things one way or another. And you factor all this in, and you can see why mud ponds are so good. But there are then obviously other factors to it as well. I know I've gone off on a bit of tangent here, because there's the breeders' argument, but the breeders are just farmers. They don't often analyze this stuff. When you actually break it down, you like say a lot of the mud ponds are very low soft water, which, you know, not always their favorite thing, because that's also part of the debate that, oh, mud ponds only deliver results because the water's soft. That's absolute bollocks. I'm not having that for a minute. I think you analyze all the other factors that I've been talking about here, and you see why you get the growth. I once broke it down on one of NND's mud ponds that they had some fish swimming around in, because they knew the volume and everything. I calculated it. One fish had 23,500 gallons of water for the whole summer. Can you imagine replicating that stocking level? I don't know many people who have a 23,500 gallon pond. And if they did, I'm sure they wouldn't want to go to all that effort just to keep one fish in it. You just can't replicate it. But on the flip side to that, there are the downsides to it as well. You know, nature plays a huge part in the success of a mud pond. You do need skill in order to get the feeding level properly, because you're having to read the environment and you can't necessarily see the fish. So you've got to know how to manage one. They are quite dependent when they're being manually fed quite a lot on getting fresh water in as well. There's quite a bit of management goes into them, so it's not just a case of dumping them in there. And like I say, there's predators, massive real problem. You know, last summer again in one of the mountains, bears were playing absolute havoc with the feeders, and this is a natural predator, you know, that can be getting the fish. You can't see what's going on, because it does often happen. You know, ponds get harvested, fish just don't come out, and there's no explanation for where they've gone. It's not like a breeder's been in there catching it, bagging it, and selling it to someone on the sly. They just can't do that. So fish do just go missing. You know, they put the best efforts in, but it can happen. They can just die because they're not being seen properly all the time and just decay at the bottom of the pond. There's all sorts can go wrong with them. So yeah, there's pros and cons big time. But yeah, you know, just sort of going on to that whole thing there, the debate. They say it's mineral rich. If we look at clay, I don't know how it's analysed. Clay itself might be, but then the water isn't. So it's not likely that the clay would be able to mineralize the water that much. So there's so much there. But I think at the root of that, it's trying to analyze why a mud pond's successful. And in my opinion, you know, you sort of listen to what I've just said, and I think your answers are all kind of sat there, to be honest. So, yeah. Evening, Alan. How you doing? Right, let's have a look. Next one. Oh, sorry. ANC Koi, Ricky, just wondering if there is much of a difference between Dainichi and Daiichi no ED size, body shape. Absolutely none whatsoever. They have got different parent sets, but imagine, so the base level is all Dainichi. You know, it's all shared from the father's creation of the Dainichi lineage, and then you've got the subsets as the parent sets, and there are some variations, but no, the core foundation is there. and yeah, I mean, you will then, as you know, the sort of working down, those parents will develop slightly different quirks and traits. But just an example, the Benny of Dainichi is the same across Toyota and Dainichi and Niigata. Where I would see a difference, however, I do see that the Kinsen, the All Japan winner that's sat at Dainichi Toyota as a parent, not produce masses of offspring, but the Kinsen Benny, because I've got some of them as well, I have visibly seen that looking like it goes to another level. But for me, the Benny of Kinsen was probably some of the best I've ever seen. Been the best possibly of some of the last All Japan Grand Champions as well. So yeah, overall traits growth wise, we're getting this. I mean, I've got a client, Sanzai Kohaku, there that's 70 centimeters. That's all done really, really quite well. So yeah, not much difference. Yeah, and it's just the size of the farms. Dainichi Niigata is a huge operation. Toyota, in comparison, is a lot smaller. But even still, as an independent farm, as Hiroshi sort of runs it with his team, it's a big operation compared with most other independents. So yeah, no real difference. All you'll get is the little quirks that can come from the different Oyagoi. But you even get that within Dainichi Niigata, and you'll get it within Toyota as well. So if you put it all together as one pot and just saw it as one, you're getting the overriding characteristics and then just them quirks of the different parent sets. So I hope that answers that one for you. Grey Fox, thank you for asking my question about Golden Corn. What do you think about Nichi Wildland? Yeah, had a few, but I think it's important with these not to get too hung up on the parents, because having grown a lot of them now, I'm not seeing too many differences. Because remember, bulk of it, the genes and what we're getting is very similar across a lot of them. I have seen, like I said, with the Kinsen particularly, that the Benny is on another level. And like with Showa, for example, the super monster Sumi does behave in a different way to that of Mona Lisa and some of the others. So yeah, you've got variances there, but overall, yeah, I mean, amongst the Kohaku lineages, I'm not seeing too many differences in characteristics, to be fair, and to the point where when I had been buying them, I'm looking more at just the fish, and knowing it's Dainichi fish and going from there, to be fair. So, Richmond, I'm starting to sell koi. If I have 5 to 12 cm koi, 10 of them, what size pond would you suggest? Crikey. I mean, 512. I have 5 12 cm koi, 5 to 12 cm, 10 of them. And you don't need a big pond for them, buddy, whatsoever. I mean, something like the tank Surrey koi I mentioned earlier should be more than efficient for those, and be massively understocked at that as well, to be honest with you. So you might as well, to be honest, that amount of koi, 10 fish of that size in even like 300 gallons, you're probably not going to be fine. They're going to have much confidence, or the behavior at sort of feeding time is not going to be all that great. So I'd certainly look at stocking more than that in a tank. Koi Vlogs. Sakai Fish Farm is getting too much hype and selling low quality fish, also expensive. Which breeder do you think are a good alternative for Gosanki, same quality level? Right, Koi Vlogs, I'm going to have to pull you up there, first of all. Sakai Fish Farm is getting too much hype and selling lower quality fish, also expensive. No, they're not selling lower quality fish, also expensive. The lowest quality at Sakai, so some of the Tosai I managed to get my hands on this year, were very reasonable. They were priced at market value, to be honest with you. Very similar prices to what I'd expect to buy that same quality from any breeder if they've got that quality, because the overriding sort of skin quality and knowing then what genetic potential they've got as well. The only thing that lets them down at the cheaper level is the pattern, because the skin's there. It's just so standard in the line. And the genetic capability, the growth capability is all there. So when these fish are coming in at similar prices to those of a much lower end breeder, it actually makes the Sakai fish look cheap. So I can't accept what you've said there in the slightest. They're not selling lower quality. They're selling what they've always sold. There's a mix. And yeah, I don't think they're overhyped as well. You know, Sakai is not an overhyped farm. This farm is probably the most consistent in the world. Well, it is the most consistent in the world. I'm just going to go with that one. On my last trip there again, you know, just absolutely mind-blowing. I've seen fish of a scale, you know, the scale there is remarkable. The quality, the amount of fish at 80 plus cm of serious quality is just staggering. And yeah, this is, you know, other farms can't produce one pond full of these, and these have got fish houses for them. It's insane. But what I also saw was incredibly slick operation, incredibly well run, all fish in really, really good condition, cared for, well fed, staff being organised, knowing where Azakari fish was, they get good updates. This is all really, really good stuff. And once again, they've gone in, they've won All Japan Grand Champion this year again. What they're doing year in, year out, you know, and I'm sure they're gonna have fish that can challenge. There's probably a reserve whole team of them sat back there waiting for their shot at the show. They just have to pick the best one and try and keep all the customers happy. You know, that's legit. There's just that many top fish there, so they're not overhyped in the slightest. What you might say is, yeah, it gets a bit crazy with the auctions. I completely agree with that. But people want the fish because of what they are, that they are remarkable, different to everything else. You know, when I was looking in them ponds, we've all, I think what's happened is Sakai's made it so common to see Kohaku and see Sankey with that huge body, the huge hump behind the head, and all the quality to go with it, that it's become the visual sort of benchmark we look for everywhere else. And there's not many other places that have, you know, that body type in that kind of quantity or any quantity at all. And Sakai's just got so much of it. So these are pretty unique traits that are there, so consistent. They tend to be really stable. And do know that Azakari results there are really consistently really good, and they do their best to really maximize on it all because of the level of infrastructure that they've got. They can do, and they know how important it is. So there's obviously reason why people are going mad for them. And what they're doing is as well, you know, the auctions, it is two sort of pronged with the auctions in all this. And this is tying into your end bit of your question there, where you say same quality level, because I think you're gonna obviously everyone's gonna come to their own conclusion at the end of this. The auctions there, and it's two pronged. So yes, it's dictating prices and pricing levels. I get that, but what happens at Sakai? There is so much demand. I know they literally sometimes there'll be conversations going on down there where they're literally having to make it secretive. You know, they could be talking to a client, making out that, you know, it's a customer's fish they've already bought, for example, when Kentro's decided to show him something in a fish house. Because if he's not careful, before you know it, there's 30 other people there on any given days in the past, and they're all then absolutely going mad at him. Why didn't I get that fish? Why didn't I get? And it literally happens like that. So that it's so much hassle for them. How do you create a fair system if you haven't got something like an auction where you can put it in there and ultimately let the price be decided on who gets the fish? So it makes sense. And that is genuinely where a lot of this has spurred from, because I see it all the time now, even with other breeders. There's certain ones where if all of a sudden one agent's been there, they post some fish, they've got these, there we go. It all goes mental. The breeder's phone starts ringing. Where's ours? Where's ours? Why I haven't got them? And it's all just a big headache and a pain in the arse for them. So there's just so many people to keep happily, especially at somewhere like Sakai, which is truly, you know, global with huge demand. They've got to do it. And there's a reason. And it's to do with the end part of the thing, the same quality level. The quality level is not the same. On the surface, you might have something that looks similar, you know, that's got good skin. And what you might say is, you know, at a certain price level, you might see like you're getting more value. So I've said this many a times before. So let's just take a jumbo tosai, for example, you know, a Sakai one at a given price versus a Hoshikin one at a given price. Hoshikin's still a super breeder, one of my favorites for Kohaku. What you'll get at Hoshikin for that similar, especially in the lower price points, is more of a pattern than you probably would on the Sakai fish without compromising on quality. To get the Sakai quality level and then get the pattern level as well, that's when them things do get pricey. But ultimately, even if you're just looking at what's in front of you, you cannot forget the genetic potential sat behind it. and that is what you're paying for ultimately with Sakai fish that come from Sakai Fish Farm, not obviously bred from a Sakai parent somewhere else where the blood's been diluted. So yes, I hope that sort of digs into that question a bit. If we want to talk about good alternative Gosanki breeders, not of the same quality level, because I've just discussed that point. Yeah, there's plenty of them. Takano for Sankey, for example, Hoshikin for Koraku, NND for all three Gosanki. There's loads of them out there, so it really just depends on, and this is why I often say you've got to sort of figure out, the budget at any given time and reverse engineer it backwards from there. And a good dealer should be able to advise you on all this. So, if you're after a jumbo toe sign, the budget's £500, straight away we know that's not really going to happen with Sakai all that easily, or there's going to be compromises. And this is how I would always go about this stuff. When I get clients ask me for their customers, it's figuring out the best way. And this is exactly it. So we work backwards and go, well, look, what's important? Is pattern important to you? Well, if it is, right, then we need to look at X, Y, or Z breeder. If pattern's not all that important, you just want to focus on the quality and size potential, okay, right, we might be able to squeeze a higher end breeder into that equation. So, yeah, that's how I look at it, and that's ultimately what's going to dictate it. But yeah, as for saying quality level, Sakai's out there on their own. Honestly, even I'm beginning to think more and more when I think about, obviously, Showa's one that they're working on big time, and Dainichi do dominate them in that category. And Dainichi and Sakai are unique, but that last visit to Sakai, seeing that scale and that operation, really did lead me to that they are deserved of that title as the best breeder in the world. So yeah, there we go. There's my thoughts on that one. And yeah, I have been, managed to get some Sakai fish this year, and I'm loving having them there. I can't wait to see, how the summer growth season pans out with that stuff. So, John Gordon, what's the best way to get rid of green water? A UV. It's the best, safest way. I don't like using the liquid treatments that you can get, because they can just change pH levels and everything so drastically, can cause you massive problems. So your UV, if you've got a UV and it's not working, make sure you change the bulb. Should really be done every 6 months for maximum efficiency. Make sure you service the quartz sleeve, because often or not they can get all caked up, and then your bulb's trying to shine through a dark sleeve. And then if that's still not working from there, make sure you're not passing too much water through it, so you're actually getting a decent contact time. So yeah, nice easy one that. Joe, evening Joe, happy birthday, mate. I've just seen it's your birthday, buddy. Yeah, catch up on that one tomorrow, mate. But yeah, have you ever used food additives like garlic and some of the liquids I've seen that are being produced in Japan? No, I'm not. This is a time restraint thing as well. Don't get me wrong, but I'm all for the food I'm using should be good enough that it's a completely balanced diet, enough that I don't have to mess around with it, and I don't think there's any advantages to come. In my case, with that being sake akari, you don't need to do anything to that stuff. That is completely balanced, everything in there, and delivers maximum performance and return from your money spent. So no need to be mucking around with it. Garlic and things like that, you're heading into the category of flavor as well, which can be a thing. Some cheaper foods lack in the flavor department, which is why you'll often see the fish not really be too fussed about them. Again, not an issue in Saki's case, because again, they know that's an important part of it. And I think we know, from most people know from the smell, it's going to be, good for the fish, because it's got quite an alluring smell, even for us as humans, to be honest. But yeah, if you've got, don't get me wrong, if you've got a food that you're using that fits within your budget, because something like sake doesn't work, and you're finding that they're not all that mad for it, yeah, flavor additives, something like garlic, can be really useful for trying to get them to take more of it down. So yeah, nice question there, Joe. Your brother there again is obviously sat on aeroplane with Wi-Fi. Leah's asked, what would be the first farm you would want to go to, and why for this time of year? Get yourself to Marihiro, mate. Honestly, that's got to be the one for me, because place is just mesmerizing. I think it's your biggest sort of, my God, this is how the shock to, this is how they do it in Japan. Ponds and ponds and ponds with fish stacked, you know, from the bottom of the pond up to the top. Every different variety, every different variation. Then that round pond, absolutely everything considered, it's mind blowing. So, and you're going to get straight in there anyway, because you end up passing it so many times in and out of the mountains. So that's probably the first one I'd go to, and probably, I think then over the course of your trip, you'll further understand why it's such a, in my opinion, an underrated place in what he does. So yeah, enjoy it, buddy. Really do. Right, we'll just we'll get a few more and then look to get wrapped up. Let's have a look. Colin Horwood, hi Ricky. Last early summer, I had to treat my pond with turning the UV off. Since then, I've not turned it back on. My pond stays clear. Is there any disadvantage not having the UV on? No, not really, other than just be prepared. You know, it can, if your pond finds a natural balance and equilibrium, this can be the case that it can sustain with good biological filtration. I think what often you'll find is, I'd be interested to know, Colin, if you're implementing a trickle or anything there, because we often see this actually managing to happen more in ponds where there's very little water change and they're kind of really left to their own with good filtration. Yeah, that's the one I'd be considering there. So I'd like to know, Colin, if you're still watching, if you actually do run a trickle and your ponds, you know, with or without, found its balance there. But yeah, there's no disadvantages to not having it on, but just be prepared. It's kind of like spring, as the lighting changes and UV intensity changes. That's always a time where, you know, you could end up, you know, just getting caught out, and there's nothing worse than having pea green water at that time of year and losing the sort of visibility, because it can come so quickly. So yeah, but nice one. If your pond's running like that, it's clearly a sign that you've got a good environment going on. Right, just bear with me. From Gary Parker, yeah. Even Ricky, how the Takano Sanki coming along? Just to make sure mine turns out better than best, otherwise I'll never hear the last of it. Yeah, really well. They've settled back in. They've had a feed increase already. I've slowly been building that on, but my God, they're flying. Body weight's right up there already, and they're starting to stick the growth on. But they're absolutely buzzing. I was planning on getting a video to put out over the weekend. So yeah, looking good and settled in well back from the event and really starting to fly. So I'll keep those increases coming, as the pond seems to be adapting to it pretty quickly. But they're up now, 25 degrees, absolutely flying. So yes, we'll start getting some videos dropped in on that to keep everybody posted. Kevin Sell, just done a quick Google and refresh clay is available in the UK. Right, just check with anybody where you've seen that, if they've actually got it in stock and it's not just listed on their website. So, but if you can get your hands on it, amazing product, absolutely amazing. And you will see a big difference in your whole pond environment from using that stuff. I absolutely promise you. Right. Just going to see which question we're going to go with last. There we go, a bit of a koi. Oh, missed my koi appreciation bit as well. We'll stick that in anyway, last 10 minutes. Gaz's koi pond. Ricky, if you was picking a shower from the Japanese koi farm Kaze, what would you be looking for in toe-side development stage? Yeah, with Kaze, pay close attention. So more than likely, you're going to see a lot more sumi up on a Kaze shower. You're going to see quite strong Benny, even at toe sites, quite a strong characteristic, and probably more sumi up. So all your typical thing. The biggest thing I would pay attention for with those is really close attention to the bone structure. These are not a particularly big growing lineage. They are Dainichi Sekiguchi cross. However, I think the Sekiguchi gene must rule a little bit more from what I've seen in the growth side of things, and what I've tended to find in having had Kaze Shore and raised them. The belly line is one to watch on these. So yeah, look for the biggest head possible and a decent sort of taper on the body. And yeah, just watch that belly line as it gets on, because that can be a problem with them. And that type of fish, if you hit them hard with the food, it does really expose that weaker belly line to them. So that's probably the bit I'd be paying the closest attention to with Kaze show. But other than that, they're really great quality, and you get some absolutely stunning patterns from them. So there we go. Right, let's finish off with this bit of koi appreciation then. So this shower is one Chris has photographed a few times now. One of my absolute best pieces, favorite pieces as well. We can see it there, the picture of it when it was Tosai. That was it pushed through to Nisai. Can't remember at what point we photographed that, but you can see the radical Sumi development there and what's happened. You know, we've almost lost that Benny spot mid-body because the Sumi's come over and completely dominated that. The massive Sumi development across the head and on the shoulders. And then more important, as we're looking at it on that right side, that Sumi that sort of came up completely out of nowhere. So, and that can happen. You know, this is what I mentioned earlier, that super monster lineage. It's sort of this typical characteristic of that super monster for the Sumi to develop in that way, a little bit different to the traditional Dainichi lines. This has been doing really well. It's a male fish. And yeah, so we've moved on to it now, looking like that. Currently, I think it was a few weeks ago he took that picture. So some interesting changes. We can see the Sumi's even more refinement and consolidation. Obviously, there's a lot more size on the body now, so it's been pulling tighter in some areas, but you can really see there the difference in consolidation on that is absolutely huge. A couple of things have happened since, though. The sort of summer's knocked it back, and that's happened more as skin has been thickening. So we can see on the head, there was more Matogoro present in a couple of areas on the head, especially in the white area. And now you can see that's kind of vanished, but that is going to come back through at some point, no doubt about it. Just what's happened here is with the extra size, we've had an even bigger level of skin thickness. And what's even starting to happen is we're seeing, you know, massive areas there. Oh, sorry, I've took it off completely now. As we're looking at it on the left, there's possibly even some Shiroji creeping in there, where it's even at one point looked as if it was going to be all Sumi. So there's just so much going on with that Sumi development. On that right side, we can see it really thickening up. There's no worry here. You know, those Benny areas that are visible are going to stay prominent in this now at the age it's at. There was no worry at this side that was going to happen. But yeah, we can see there it's happening. And now the Matogoro starting to creep up on this. That head pattern is forming more and more at the moment, to be honest with you. So yeah, mega fish. Like for me, I think this is total quality wise the best that's come from that original batch. And it's yeah, one that is actually staying with me again this year, just to see what I can continue to do with it, because I feel like there's so much more to come from this fish. You can see there looking, you know, a bit yellow sort of in the head and the fins just from the raising. So that is starting to really refine at the minute as well. And yeah, exciting piece. And I think it just epitomizes Dainichi Showa. And the next couple of years is when I truly believe with the right raising, that fish is really gonna come alive. But yeah, wicked transformation. Just one more time for you there. So you see Tosai, Nisai, and then bang into Sansai. And even still a young fish, please don't forget that, you know, 2 more years will be a conversation before we even talk about it being considered done. It could even be a couple of years beyond that when it really hits its peak. So yeah, at this point, still a very young fish with a lot to do, in my opinion. So there we have it, folks. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, just one quick plug from Crafty. Raffle up to £1,380. That is absolutely amazing. It would be nice to get it up to the £1,500 mark before the end of the month when we're closing it. Nice round number. And any other donations welcome. But remember, that's for an amazing, I'm not sure if I've got the video of it still, a Chiba. That one there. Koda Chiba. Fiver a go for an entry. Stunning fish. So yeah, you can get yourself over to that page if you've not participated already. But it would be amazing to round that off at 1,500 quid before that donation gets made. And thank you very much to everybody once again for supporting that. And then yeah, one last look at the Omasako fish available in the event. Like I say, you can catch them all on our website. I think there's a link kicking around on Facebook as well. Available to get through one of our dealers, first come, first serve on Sunday. They are fish not to be missed if you are in the market for a sheer-up Sori. If you're not and you've already got one, then you can never have too many black and white fish in your pond. Take that from me as an absolute given. Yeah, amazing quality. He's put a hell of a selection there together as Chris. So, yeah, there we go, folks. Thank you for everybody who has tuned in. Yeah, we'll be back next week. So, happy days. New auction pictures are up soon. And there we go. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. And I'll catch you next week.